Hi everybody, it's Peter Nolan from New Age Sharpening. I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I started sharpening many years ago, and even though that doesn't, I know that doesn't make me a good sharpener, but what it does mean is that I've made a lot of mistakes, probably more than you, and I've learned from most of them, and I'm not selling anything. All the stones and anything you see in this video are things I've bought. Nobody sent me them to try to sell or for free or anything like that. So my only purpose here is to try to help folks who are trying to learn how to sharpen. And one of the things that I get a lot of, and because I have I have a blog and a website and stuff, and often people talk to me about coarse. What are the best stones to get? I've always said if you're going to buy one water stone, and you're only going to start with one. Start at 1,000 grit. But if you have and then you move laterally from coarse to fine. So if a three stone combination is perfect, coarse, medium, and fine. So I want to talk about coarse stones and how important I think they are in a lineup, and that you don't have to be afraid of them. They're not going to grab the knife out of your hand and scratch the blade or anything like that. They're not going to take away so much metal that you're going to screw your knife off, because if it does that, it's not the stone, it's your fault for that, because you're just using too much pressure. So it's just about manipulating pressure and using it wisely. So if you want to get into coarse stones and you want to see how aggressive they feel and things like that, well, just lighten up on your pressure until you get used to the hang of it. So that's all there is to it. So now, I know that some people think the coarse stone, 1,000 grit, for example, is a coarse stone. Well, I suppose if you've only got a couple stones in your lineup, if you got a 1,000 and 6,000, and that's your sharpening setup, yes, I guess the 1,000 is a coarse stone and their 6,000 is a fine stone. But for the purpose of this video, for me, coarse stones are going to be in the 220, 500, 400, 600, 800, and 24 grit, but I don't have any of those. So I have here 220 sharpened glass, 500 sharpened glass, nano 400. One of the things that I need to really emphasize is that don't think you need to go out and buy the best Japanese waterstones in the world to become a good sharpener. People, I got hung up on that. I got hung up on brand names and thinking, okay, my problem is that my stones aren't good and aren't the right stones. Only to find that even though I did go out and buy these beautiful stones, when I was starting, it didn't make me a better knife sharpener. I wasn't a good knife sharpener, and I'm not saying I'm a good knife sharpener. I'm not. What made me feel that I was a better sharpener was gaining confidence in my technique and process, and it all came through practice. So, in learning the process, it wasn't about because I had nano waterstones that made me a decent water sharpener. So my point is, if you've got whatever you're using is fine. Unless it's a $8 piece of crap that you went out and got at the hardware store, get rid of that ASAP. Get yourself a decent waterstone. Okay, so why are they important? Why do I think it's important to start with a coarse stone? Yes, and a lot of people, well, I think most people don't sharpen knives, but if you're watching this video, you're interested in sharpening knives. And a lot of people just sharpen their own knives. So theoretically, if you've got your knife sharp, then you should never need a coarse stone, because it's not dull enough to warrant one. And yes, you can sharpen a dull knife with a 1,000 grit any stone as well. But sooner or later, your knife is going to be dull. You're going to get good at knife sharpening if you're not already, and other people are going to want you to sharpen their knives. And believe me, you're not going to believe how dull other people's knives are. So you're going to become an edge snob like I am and judge everybody else's knives. And they're never going to be sharp enough. So a coarse stone is important, folks. Now, for one thing, I have never scratched my knife when I was using a coarse stone. The only way you're going to scratch it is if you dropped it. Yes, you could scratch it. Is if you dropped it on a coarse stone and dragged it over the stone like this, you could scratch that blade. If you were careless enough to drop it, okay? Or if you were too aggressive with the stone, if you used too much pressure and kept grinding and grinding and grinding thoughtlessly and needlessly, and yes, you're going to grind away a lot of metal that you don't need to, okay? Now, if you are afraid of sharpening and scratching a knife, you can always tape it up. Now, for the purpose of this video, I've used this blue tape. It's not great. It can come off easily. There's other really good quality cellophane tapes that will do the job. It won't come off, but okay, so some of this stuff, it will come off over time, but it's good. It's better than nothing. So there's always that option. So why do I think coarse stones are important? Because they have the ability to raise a burr quickly. The raising of a burr during sharpening your process is a pivotal moment. It's that it's a tactile sensation. It's something that you can actually feel that signals sharpening success. See? Because if you've raised a burr on your knife, it means that you've successfully removed the fatigued metal from one side of the knife and it's flipped over to the other. So eventually you form burr on both sides of the knife from heel to tip, then you remove them. Okay, that's what you do when you sharpen knives. So a coarse stone allows you to do that quickly. So if you're just starting out, yes, if you're just learning and this is the first time you ever sharpened a knife, yeah, maybe the 1000 grit stone is a better choice until you get comfortable with the motion. But don't be afraid to use a 1000 grit stone. As I said, it's not going to grab this knife out of my hand. And what I would do is just ease up on my pressure, okay? So when I sharpen, I use 4 levels of pressure on my first stone, coarse stone. I use heavy, moderate, medium, and light. Very, very light. So I wouldn't use, if I'm just starting out and this knife is moderately dull, I wouldn't use heavy pressure. I just use common sense pressure, we'll call it. Okay. Enough pressure so that it's me and this stone working together, and I'm using enough pressure, the applicable amount of pressure that's going to generate a burr. Okay? It's me and this stone working together. The abrasive powers of this 400 grit water stone are removing metal. And that's what I want to do. I want to remove the fatigued metal that's formed, that's making this knife dull. So the secret is that you don't want to remove too much metal. So the burr, over time, you're going to learn that you want that burr to be as subtle and small as possible. Okay, yes, and I know you can sharpen a knife without forming a burr, starting at the right moment. But I don't want to do that. I don't teach that. What I teach is that form a burr, learn how to form it as small and as subtle as possible. So I can feel a little burr there. Now I'm going to flip the knife and go on this coarse stone and form the burr on the other side. Okay? And my pressure fingers here are doing their job. They're pressing down as I'm pulling knife towards me. And I'm okay? Pressure, no pressure, pressure, no pressure. And I do this until I form a burr again. So I've now formed the burr on this side of the knife, nice and quickly, because of the power of this beautiful coarse waterstone. So now it's all about removing the burr. So some people, and I think one of the things I used to do at one point in time, when I had the burr formed, I would switch from a coarse stone to a medium stone. You don't have to do that. You can get a lot out of this stone. Just lighten up, reduce your pressure by at least 50%, and now it's all about burr removal. And you can see that this stone, there's not big fragments of metal hanging on the stone. It's not ripping stone off, because I'm using common sense and I'm just using a little bit of pressure here to remove that burr. Okay, still on the same stone and still removing burr. I'm doing a little bit of coarse stone refinement. Okay, so, and the key is that you got to get your knife sharp on the coarse stone. If you've got a coarse stone, and let's say a 400 grit stone and a 1000 grit stone, don't move. What I recommend is that you don't move to the medium stone until the knife is sharp. So you can test it for sharpness with telephone book paper. So this knife was a little dull and everything. So you can see that the coarse stone, it can get your knife sharp. So don't be afraid to linger on this stone and let it do its job before moving to the other stone. And also, a coarse stone, some of them feel coarse. They feel a little rough, like gritty. Okay, that's fine. It's doing its job. There's nothing like the feeling of moving from that coarse stone onto the beautiful 1000 grit stone. And this is your Nano Wachusera Dream 1000 grit stone. Extremely silky glide path here. And you're going to feel that, okay, I did my work on my coarse stone here. Now I'm moving to this 1000 grit stone, and it's almost like a reward. You rewarded yourself. I was patient on the coarse stone. I wasn't afraid of it. I got the knife sharp on it, and now this beautiful 1000 grit stone is just removing some of the scratch marks on those bevels that the coarse stone left. So the whole point is that you have common sense. Where people aren't stupid. They're not going to try to embed their knife into the stone, and then they're not going to be slopping around on the stone to get it scratched. Okay, and it's not peeling metal away. A coarse stone is not going to peel metal away. It's not. This isn't a grinder. It's a wet stone. Okay, so it's not going to peel metal away because you're going to modulate your pressure. Do not let it do that. Okay, so light up your knives, folks. Get used to using coarse water stones. They are absolutely fantastic. Okay, thank you very much.